Hello friends, and welcome to Figure Study, where I'm finally taking a look at something that I've been wanting to get my hands on for a while, but couldn't because Big Bad Toy Store took about a month and a half to 2 months to get it in stock when everyone else got it in stock. Oh well. But that thing is, as you can tell, the Archecore Frostlight figure, which is from Toys Alliance, which is kind of surprising. I forget if it was Toys Alliance that produced or Toys Alliance that conceptualized the Astrobots, like Apollo and all them, but I think Toys Alliance produced them and Toy Notch designed them. Point is, they are doing this now and it transforms and it's very cool. I know about the whole combining thing that they're planning to do with this guy, and I just want to say up front, right now I don't have any plans on getting the full combined set. I just, for whatever reason, am not really feeling the full combine mode from the photos that I saw. Like, it does look cool, but it doesn't look cool enough to me to justify the expense and the amount of shelf space it's going to take up. So I've got Frostlight, and as far as I'm concerned, Frostlight is totally fine as a standalone. This is a really, really good figure. But regardless, we are talking about Frostlight, and Frostlight is a very, very cool figure, as I already said. I love the Mad Max style that this truck has, and there's no other way to put it. It's clearly that kind of style. I know Mad Max has become kind of an unfair shorthand for post-apocalyptic type stuff where you've got semi-recognizable vehicles with random stuff bolted onto them for armor, so basically, improve survivability in a harsh environment. Mad Max is just shorthand for that, so we all know what I'm talking about. But yeah, this is a very cool truck mode. It's got some really nice detailing on it with lots of rivets and panels molded in. But then there's also a lot of really nice paint and even some nice color separation on like the roll bars or whatever you want to call them on like the sides of the doors. Some really nice tampos. There's some nice color variation between the different plastics. And just looking at it in like regular room light, some of the angles and curves that they have on these panels, in particular on the sides of the cab just behind where the driver sits, it's really interesting how it works because it's one cohesive color of like gray plastic, but because of the angles, when the light hits it, it makes it look like it's using multiple tones of gray, just because certain sections come off looking a little bit darker or a little bit lighter because of the angles involved. It's a really interesting trick with the molding. And then of course around back you've got what is obviously a shield stapled on there, but it's cool. I appreciate the fact that there is storage for the accessories in the vehicle mode. I always love it when they do that. And yeah, I mean, the overall color and detailing is really nice. I'm going to talk more about a lot of this stuff when we get to the robot mode, but I really like these kind of, not random, but these white stripes that have been painted on to the dark gray plastic that helps to just kind of add a little bit more visual interest to it. And they also did a really great job of making these painted, or not painted, tampographed, whatever you want to call them, details, look like they've been hand painted because there's like this rough edge around the line for all of them, and it's really cool. It's a really nice detail, and it kind of sells the idea of this being something that was possibly found and repaired or cobbled together or armored up by other people. Oh, but before I forget, I do want to mention it is very cool how there is actually space if you pop open this little bit here. You can pull that up, and there is a little spot in there, which you're going to be seeing on a close-up video, where you can have a little driver sit. That's really neat. You can also push down this little front panel to give the driver in there a little bit, I guess, better of a view. Though if they're tearing down the road or whatever you want to call them in this world at a good clip, then not having something to shield your face from the wind is probably not the best idea. But it's really cool that a figure can actually sit in there. And the Archecore stuff, it does have 3/4 inch scale figures, I think, that are designed to work with this stuff. Frostlight does not come with one of those figures, however, so if you want to have somebody driving this thing, you're going to either have to buy an Archecore figure separately or get one of the ones from like one of the Wolves or something like that, because the Wolves do come with a driver from what I understand, I'm pretty sure. This guy does not, but that's fine. The figure's got some really good heft to it too. There's a little bit of die cast in here. I I know that these smokestacks on the sides are die-cast. I don't know if anything else is off the top of my head. Well, there are some shoulder joints that are die-cast, and I think some of the inner frame of what becomes the robot chest is die-cast. I don't know about anything in the legs or this section of the truck, but there is some die-cast, but also it's just nice, sturdy, chunky plastic. So this has really nice heft to it. It's also not a bad size at all. I mean, it is big compared to a deluxe, but like if you look at the size of where the driver sits for both Frostlight and Downshift, it almost looks like it could be to scale. I don't know for sure that it is, but it has that kind of look to it, which is really cool. It is just a very nice, big truck. And it looks cool. So I like that. As for Frostlight's transformation, I don't believe Toys Alliance is known for doing transforming figures. I'm not entirely sure if they've ever done a transforming figure before Frostlight. It's possible. I could be just not remembering it. All I know is this is really spectacular, and it's extremely impressive if this is the first time they've done a proper transforming figure before, because there's a lot of really clever stuff happening here. There is a little bit of nuance to it, like getting the side panels of the truck to accordion down properly for the shins and needing to remember to like slide that one joint out to swing it down to give you the room and slide it back in. Getting the arms pegged and unpegged from the cab, I find it's actually easiest to bend them at the elbow because it's got some really nice elbow bends. So if you use the elbow bend, you can get the cab section transformed, then get the rear section transformed, and basically just straighten out the arms to close everything off. And then similarly, going back to the robot mode, you can unhook the forearms from the back section of the cab and then bend the elbows to give you the clearance you need to start working on the lower body first. It's just little bits of nuance to keep in mind. Another thing that threw me off, and also I think threw some other people off from what I remember seeing before, is the fact that when you extend the head, you actually have to peg the neck into the top of the torso. That joint does swing forward and it does bring the neck forward, but it's actually meant to peg in place. And you're going to want to do that because the joint that is connecting the neck to the torso is very loose. Not going to fall off loose, but like very floppy loose. So when it's pegged in place, the neck is really solid, and then you've got some really nice ball jointed movement on the head. But until you peg it in place, it's going to flop around at the base. And the resulting robot is kind of amazing looking. I love the aesthetic of this thing and the heft of it, the chunkiness of it, the proportions, the way all these different design elements come together. It's really, really cool. It's also pretty clever how a lot of these elements are things that were seen in the vehicle mode, but they've shifted around or flipped inside out to kind of change things around a bit. First, foremost, and most obviously is the truck grille for the chest. And it does do a little thing where the kind of nasty spiked fenders curl up a bit to just kind of slim up the waist a little bit and have something happen in there to change the shape a bit. And that looks really cool. But in addition to that, you've got like the wheel wells, the entire arm is, part of the side of the truck. The legs, you got part of the side of the truck, and also the exhaust pipes are now on the sides. The feet, the bottoms of the feet were actually the back part of the back section of the truck bed, and I really love how the ankles kind of open up to make the back section of the truck, and then you can fold them back in and around, and the wheels just sort of become the ankles. The colors here are great too. I love the mixture of this like matte black and really dark, almost brown burgundy red, with some of that gray, some of those white highlights, and some bits of silver in particular in like the shoulders, and then little hits of copper here and there in like the chest, the horns, and the pipes on the back, which you can kind of see sticking over the head a little bit. There's also some of that copper in the backs of the cabs, which is just like venting, and it just looks cool. I also like how the design is a little bit asymmetrical in how you've got the paw print paint deco on the left knee and the number on the left-hand side of the chest, and you don't have that on the right-hand side. It's just like a little bit of asymmetry. Personally, I think I would have preferred it if they had gone with one on one side, one on the other, like maybe have the 03 on the left and the paw print on the right knee, as opposed to having both asymmetrical details on one side, but that's just me. It still looks really cool. And yeah, this is just a really, really solid looking robot man. This design is really cool, and the fact that it transforms is really impressive, and it transforms, as I said, really well. I quite honestly don't think I have any complaints about the aesthetic of this robot mode. It looks fantastic. I love all the little touches, like these metal shin guard bits at the bottom with these like holes punched in them, the almost spiked looking knuckle guards on the hands, and the fact that the fingertips are ever so slightly sharp and pointy. The fact that the torso is very clearly the front section of the truck, but again, the way that the bumper just kind of angles in a little bit to clean up the silhouette is really, really nice. Even from the back, like, you don't really have kibble on this guy. You've got, I guess, these flaps that stick out a little bit if you angle them out that make up part of the side of the truck. But when you fold them in, they just are the back. It's like, okay, that's fine. As for the head, I'm getting kind of an Oni vibe from it. And I don't know whether that was actually the intention or not, and I could be reading way too much into it, and my apologies if I'm wrong here, but I just kind of have that vibe from it in terms of the reddish face, the really harsh and angry looking angles to it, the big copper horns. It kind of gives me that vibe. The colors are really nice, with that black plastic for the head kind of showing through in the face a little bit as well, but then you've got the white on the sides and that really nice, almost brown burgundy for the rest of the face, and then those blue eyes shining through pretty nicely, and the copper for the horns just stands out so nicely. As for the articulation, that head is very, very nicely articulated. It is on a ball joint and it can look up a lot, and that's with the base of the neck pegged into the torso. You can also look down quite a bit, you can turn left and right a lot. You can actually do a full 360 as well, but you do need to angle the head up a bit in order to get it to spin around, and then you kind of scrape the chin against the collar in the back, and I don't want to risk scraping that paint. The only thing to be careful of is if you move it too far to the left or right and it's down, it'll end up underneath that kind of front collar, and you won't be able to lift it up unless you turn it slightly. As for the arms, you get full 360 all the way around. And this is the joint that, from what I've seen and heard, is not strong enough to support the boxing glove that the wolf becomes, though it feels pretty solid in hand, so maybe it's just earlier runs of the figure that had that problem. The in and out motion on the shoulders, though, is kind of ridiculous. This whole, like, silvery-looking, metallic-y section is die-cast, and the ratchet is very solid as well. You do also get a bicep swivel, which reveals some really nice detail as well on the inside of the forearm. You've got a double-jointed elbow that bends at the elbow and then kind of bends partway through the forearm, which is a little strange, but it does get the job done, and it allows you to curl the arm in pretty well. And you've got this panel on the side that kind of covers up the fact that the elbow's bending in a slightly weird way. The hands do rotate left and right and can also swing in for the transformation, but they have a dedicated hinge that allows the hand to angle down. So you can put something in his hand and have him angle it forward or whatever. That's cool. As for the fingers, the base of the thumb is on a swivel, so it just spins left and right. And then the tip of the thumb has a hinge that it can angle up and down. And then the fingers themselves, the index finger has 2 joints, and the remaining 3 fingers are all pinned together, but they also have 2 joints, one at the knuckle and one kind of at the midpoint. You also get a full 360 of waist swivel. You do not have an ab crunch, but you kind of can if you want. There's this little piston-y looking joint. If you unpeg that little strut, then you can use the transformation joint for an ab crunch. And it doesn't go forward super duper far just because of the shape of the torso and the shape of the pelvis. They kind of bump into each other before too long, but you can get a little bit expressive with it. The only downside is when you do that, there's a big gap now on the back, but eh. Now the legs. I don't know if it's just mine, but the thigh swivels on this guy out of the box were alarmingly tight. They have loosened up a bit after me just using them a little bit more in posing, but something to be aware of. The hips go forward and back really nicely. It's a pretty decent range on the forward and backward motion. Despite appearances, the knee is fantastic. Yeah, this guy's bulky and he's got a single-jointed knee, but that single-jointed knee can bend all the way in so that the thigh is touching the back of the calf. And it doesn't look terrible doing it either. As for the feet, you do get some up and down motion, which is thanks to that transformation joint, but it does allow you to move the ankle up and down, mostly down and to the back rather than forward, but I think that's fine. And you also get a pretty decent amount of ankle tilt. It's not 90 degrees or anything like that, but it's still pretty nice and allows you to give this guy a pretty stable stance. And then there are the accessories that we're kind of shoring up the back of the vehicle mode, and they are fine. They look good. They separate out via a slider. There's just like a kind of T-shaped slot on the inside of what is obviously the shield, and a T-shaped tab, I guess, on the top of what will maybe not so obviously become a hammer, and they just slot together and they hold really securely in place, and that's really nice. For the hammer, you just fold down the handle, and that gives you this very big chunky warhammer with a big metal plate that looks like it's going to destroy whatever it lands on, which it probably will, because if this thing is to scale, then the head of the hammer would be the size of a person. And then the shield is a big chunky circle with some really nice molding on it, and around back there's also some really nice detailing in there as well as stuff that you can use for storage. There's this little tab that you can flip out on the back of the shield, and there's a clip on the back of the robot, and you can clip into the back. As for the hammer, I don't know if there's a way for this to store, but it's a hammer. It's his weapon. Just put it in his hand. And as is usually the case with these kinds of weapons, you just tab it into the hand, close the fingers, and you're good to go. The tab is not super secure, but the fingers and thumb are tight enough, and the hammer itself is light enough that you don't really have to worry about it shaking itself loose. It would be nice if the tab was a little bit more solid, but it's not a huge deal. And then there's actually putting the shield in his hand, which is kind of fun. First, you want to fold that tab away, obviously, and then you can actually use that kind of T-bar slider that's on the back of the shield to slide it onto his forearm. And you can just slide it on so that it's attached, but what's also cool is you can have him hold it. There's actually a little handle inside the shield that you can pull out. And what you want to do is angle it so that the handle goes into his hand. That'll give you just enough space to put the shield back over that slider tab thing on the back of his forearm. And if you line it up, you can then slide the shield down into place with the handle still in his hand. And then you can wrap his fingers around the handle. And I mean, that shield's not coming off when you slide it in place regardless, but once he's gripping that thing, it is definitely not coming off. Taking the shield off and clipping it on his back again, because I forgot about one other thing. He actually has knives that are stored on him, and the knives were actually visible in the truck mode of all things. So the way you access the knives is by folding down these panels in the shins and pop out these little knives. And the knives unfold and snap into place, and then you've got a pretty decent little knife with some really nice molding, the serrated edge on the back. The blade has been painted, and it's just a really nice sculpt. And this knife is like, again, if we're going by scale, this knife is almost as tall as a person in this universe. Now, there are no tabs on the knives. You just put them in his hand and then close the fingers around it, but that's fine. Like I said, the fingers are sturdy enough that they hold the knife in place just fine. You don't need the tabs. The knife isn't heavy or anything like that, so you don't have to really worry about it falling out. It does look pretty tiny in his hand, but it's still cool that it's there as an option. I like that you could theoretically view it as just a last-ditch weapon if the hammer gets lost. And it's the exact same story on the other knee. And to fold the knife up, you want to fold it up with the blade going in. I mean, you can tell where it's going to fold up because there's a big slot on the inside of the grip, but you fold it in and it just kind of settles into place. And then the way that this goes into the shin is you basically just want to have this, what looks kind of like a tab. You want that facing either to the left or right, and it'll help you wedge the knife into the shin guard panel. And yeah, this thing is just intensely cool. It's the kind of thing that looks like it will ruin your day if you approach it the wrong way. But man, this thing is so cool. And still nice and hefty, because I mean the truck was nice and hefty too, and this is the exact same amount of plastic and die cast as the truck. All the accessories are here, it's just kind of spread out a little bit differently. But yeah, this guy's really nice and chunky and hefty, and he's just really fun to mess around with. The transformation, as I said, is surprisingly sturdy and solid for what it is. In terms of size, Frostlight is also a pretty beefy figure. Like, it's very chunky, but also very tall, way taller than a Deluxe, taller than a Leader, not like Commander tall, but, you know, it's pretty tall. And again, very beefy, very chunky, very hefty, the plastic's nice and solid. It's the kind of thing that if you dropped it on another toy, it would probably break that other toy. Oh, and the hips. The hips are die cast. I didn't mention that. Yes, the hip joints our diecast. This guy as just a standalone figure is fantastic. I'd say if you're curious about this, if you think this looks cool, and you're not entirely sure if you want to go in on the combine mode, just get this. Get Frostlight and use that as your kind of jumping off point. If you really like it and you want to get more in the series, then that's great. If you get it and you decide this is enough, that's also great. I would say if you get it and don't like it, then you haven't wasted money on the rest of them, but I feel like if you're thinking about getting this and you do get it, there's very little chance you won't like it. I mean, it's possible, but I don't think there's a big chance of that happening. It doesn't fit with anything else I have because it's not a Transformer in any way. It doesn't really fit the aesthetic of other Transformers figures I have, whether they're third-party or official, but it's a very, very cool transforming robot toy. So if you are in the market, if you think this looks cool, I certainly recommend it. But I've carried on long enough. I've been trying to keep this short and clearly have not. Hopefully the edited video won't be that bad. But that is going to do it for Archecore Frostlight, and as I said, this thing is amazing and definitely worth getting if you're kind of thinking about it. What do you all think of this guy, or the rest of the Archecore line, or the Combiner, or the Wolves, or whatever? Whatever your thoughts, feel free to chime in down below. I always enjoy hearing from you all. If you like this video or any of my other videos and want to support the channel outside of watching the video in the first place, liking, commenting, that kind of thing, I do have a Patreon. It's a single $1 tier, gets you early access to new videos, access to polls, hopefully, if I start doing those, so you can have some say in what happens with the channel, and will also get you the occasional access to like behind-the-scenes posts, teasers of new customs I'm working on, that kind of thing. With all that said, thank you everybody for watching, and remember, art is more than meets the eye.